The evening began like many others, calm on the surface but heavy underneath, and Claire Whitman sensed at the moment she stepped into the house, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows while the familiar smell of coffee from the morning still lingered in the kitchen, and although nothing looked wrong, something felt unsettled. The kind of feeling that made her slow her steps and listen more closely, and as she moved down the hallway she noticed Ethan's bedroom door was not fully closed, which immediately caught her attention because her 19-year-old stepson valued his privacy more than anything and rarely left that door open even by accident, and at first Claire told herself it meant nothing, that young adults were unpredictable, but the quiet coming from the room felt different, not peaceful, not busy, just empty. And without thinking too much she knocked lightly, expecting a quick response or maybe an annoyed voice telling her to go away, yet no sound came back, and that pause made her uneasy, so she pushed the door open just a little and what she saw made her heart tighten instantly, because Ethan was sitting on the edge of his bed with his shoulders curved inward, his head lowered, his hands covering his face as if he were trying to disappear, and the room was unusually neat, almost too neat, as if he hadn't had the energy to move anything. And his phone lay on the floor near his feet, the screen cracked and dark, a small detail that told a bigger story, and Claire froze in place, suddenly aware that she was witnessing something deeply personal, something she hadn't been invited into, and her first thought was to step back and close the door, to give him space and pretend she hadn't seen anything, because that felt safer for both of them, but then Ethan let out a quiet, broken breath, the kind that comes from holding in pain for too long. And in that moment Claire didn't see her stepson, she saw a young man carrying more weight than he knew how to handle, and before she could stop herself she spoke softly, calling his name, and Ethan startled slightly, lifting his head just enough for her to see his red eyes and the shock on his face, quickly followed by embarrassment, and he wiped his face with his sleeve, straightening a little as if trying to pull himself together, mumbling that he was fine even though it was clear he wasn't, and Claire immediately apologized for walking in, her voice gentle but unsure, standing halfway between staying and leaving, and for a few seconds neither of them moved, the air thick with awkward silence and unspoken emotion, and she realized how little she truly knew about the inner world of this young man who had lived under the same roof for years, shared dinners, short conversations, polite smiles, yet kept his real feelings carefully hidden, and as she stood there she felt a strange pull, not curiosity, not intrusion, but concern rooted in something deeper, because she remembered what it felt like to be that age, to feel overwhelmed by emotions that seemed too big to explain, and she also remembered her own worst moments, the ones she had faced alone because she didn't think anyone would understand, and that memory made it impossible for her to turn away now, so instead of leaving she took a small step into the room, careful, respectful, and told Ethan she didn't need details, that she just wanted to make sure he was okay. And although he didn't answer right away, he didn't ask her to leave either, and that silence felt like permission, like a quiet request for someone to stay, and as Claire stood there she felt the weight of the moment settle on her, knowing that whatever she did next mattered more than she realized, because sometimes life changes not through loud events but through simple choices, like opening a door, pausing instead of walking away, and choosing to see someone's pain when it would be easier to ignore it, and she had no idea yet that this brief moment, this accidental crossing of boundaries, would stay with her long after the rain stopped and the night passed, because she had just stepped into the beginning of a truth that would slowly reshape how she saw love, family, and herself. Claire stayed near the door at first, unsure how close was too close, then slowly pulled the chair from Ethan's desk and sat down, keeping her voice calm and her posture open, making it clear she wasn't there to judge or push. And for a long moment neither of them spoke, the rain filling the silence until Ethan finally exhaled and said in a low voice that everything had fallen apart, that the person he trusted most had walked away, and Claire listened without interrupting, letting him speak at his own pace, and little by little the story came out, not in perfect order but in honest pieces, about a girl he met during his first year of college, about late-night calls, shared plans, promises that felt real at the time, and how he believed that loving someone meant holding on tighter, trying harder, becoming better so they wouldn't leave, and as he talked his voice cracked, not loudly, but enough to show how much effort he had spent holding himself together, and he admitted that the message ending everything was short and polite, almost kind, which somehow hurt more than anger would have, because there was nothing to argue against, nothing to fix, just an ending he didn't choose. And Claire felt a deep ache in her chest because his words sounded painfully familiar, echoing her own past heartbreaks, the ones she rarely talked about. And when Ethan said he kept replaying every mistake, wondering what he did wrong, Claire leaned forward slightly and told him that sometimes people leave not because love wasn't real, but because they don't know how to grow inside it. And Ethan looked at her then, really looked, surprised by her honesty, and asked if she had ever felt that way. And for a brief second Claire hesitated, aware of her role, but she decided truth mattered more than distance in that moment, so she nodded and said yes, more times than she liked to admit, and she told him that pain doesn't mean failure, it means something mattered, and that healing isn't about forgetting but about learning to carry the memory without letting it control you. And Ethan listened closely, his posture slowly changing, his shoulders easing as if hearing someone else name the feelings made them less heavy, and he admitted he felt lost, unsure of who he was without that relationship, afraid that this heartbreak meant he wasn't enough for anyone. And Claire answered carefully, choosing simple words, telling him that worth doesn't disappear when someone leaves, that it exists before love and after it. And as they talked she noticed how young he still was beneath the pain, how much pressure he had placed on himself to grow up too fast, to prove something to the world. And she realized that his sadness wasn't just about a breakup, it was about identity, about feeling unseen and uncertain in a life that suddenly felt fragile. And when he finally paused, staring at the floor, Claire said something she hadn't planned, that it was okay to hurt, that strength wasn't pretending everything was fine, and that asking for support didn't make him weak. And those words seemed to reach him in a way nothing else had, because he nodded slowly, blinking back tears he no longer tried to hide. And for the first time since she entered the room, the air felt lighter, not because the pain was gone, but because it had been shared. And as Claire sat there she became aware of how deeply this conversation mattered, how it had shifted their relationship from polite distance to genuine connection, and that realization made her careful, reminding herself that compassion must always stay within its proper place. And when she finally stood to leave, she told Ethan she was proud of him for speaking honestly and that he didn't have to face this alone, but also that he deserved support from many places, not just her. And Ethan thanked her quietly, his voice steadier than before. And as Claire stepped back into the hallway she felt changed, not overwhelmed, but awake, understanding that this moment wasn't about crossing lines but about recognizing pain when it appears and responding with kindness. And she knew that what had begun as an accidental interruption had turned into something meaningful, a moment of truth that would continue to unfold in ways she could not yet see, leaving her thoughtful, unsettled, and deeply aware that both of them were standing at the edge of emotional change. Days passed quickly after that night, and the house settled into a new rhythm that felt calm on the outside but carried quiet tension underneath, because Ethan began to change in small but noticeable ways, waking earlier, spending more time outside his room, speaking more openly at dinner. And Claire noticed everything without meaning to, the way his voice sounded steadier, the way he smiled again, not fully healed but trying. And she told herself this was good, this was what she wanted, yet she couldn't ignore how often her thoughts returned to him during the day, wondering if he was coping, if the weight had lifted even a little. And these thoughts made her uncomfortable because they felt heavier than normal concern, rooted not in worry alone but in recognition, a sense that they shared something unspoken. And as weeks went by their conversations became easier, shorter but honest, exchanged while passing in the hallway or washing dishes, never crossing a line yet carrying a depth that surprised her. And Claire found herself choosing her words carefully, keeping her tone neutral, reminding herself again and again that care must never become confusion. And still, late at night, when the house was quiet and Mark slept beside her, she lay awake thinking about emotional distance, about how easy it was for years to pass without truly being seen. And she realized that Ethan's pain had opened a door inside her she had kept closed for a long time, a door leading to her own unmet needs, her own loneliness. And this truth unsettled her because it had nothing to do with Ethan as a person and everything to do with what his honesty had reflected back to her. And one evening she overheard him laughing softly on the phone in the backyard, a real laugh, lighter than before. And instead of relief she felt a sharp mix of happiness and sadness, happiness that he was healing and sadness she couldn't fully explain. And that moment forced her to confront something important, that she had grown attached not to him but to the role she played in his healing, to being needed, to being emotionally present in a way she hadn't felt in years, and this awareness scared her enough to act, because she understood how easily emotional closeness could blur into something unhealthy if left unchecked, so she began to gently pull back, not cold, not distant, just balanced, encouraging Ethan to spend time with friends, to focus on his goals, to build support beyond the walls of the house. And Ethan noticed the shift, asking once if he had done something wrong, and Claire assured him he hadn't, that growth sometimes meant learning to stand on your own again, and he accepted this with maturity that surprised her, showing her that he was stronger than she first thought. And still, the quiet moments stayed with her, moments when she folded laundry and remembered his words, when she drove to work replaying conversations, when she realized how deeply emotional connection mattered to her and how little of it she had allowed herself to need. And this realization changed how she saw her marriage, not with blame or anger but with clarity, understanding that comfort had slowly replaced intimacy, and that neither she nor Mark had meant for that to happen. It had simply happened through routine and silence. And one night as they sat together watching television, barely speaking, Claire felt the full weight of that truth settle in her chest, and she knew she could no longer ignore it, because Ethan's heartbreak had shown her the cost of emotional neglect, the way unspoken feelings grow heavy and lonely, and she promised herself she would not let her life drift quietly without honesty, and that promise brought both fear and relief, fear of difficult conversations and relief that she finally saw the path forward. And as she went to bed that night she understood that part of loving responsibly meant recognizing when to step back, when to protect boundaries, and when to face your own truth, instead of hiding behind care for others. And although nothing dramatic had happened, nothing visible or loud, she knew something inside her had shifted permanently, because she had learned that emotional closeness is powerful, that it can heal but also confuse, and that maturity lies not in denying feelings but in guiding them wisely. And with that understanding, Claire stood at a quiet turning point, ready to choose honesty over comfort, clarity over silence, and growth over fear, knowing that the hardest part of the journey was not what she felt, but what she needed to do next. The morning light filled the kitchen softly as Claire stood by the counter, feeling calm in a way she hadn't felt for weeks, because clarity had finally replaced confusion. And when Ethan walked in she invited him to sit, choosing her words with care and honesty, telling him she cared deeply about his well-being but that real healing meant balance, independence, and support from many places, not just one person. And Ethan listened without defensiveness, nodding as if he already understood, admitting he had started to feel stronger again, that talking to friends and focusing on his future helped more than he expected, and Claire felt relief knowing he was moving forward on his own. And with that conversation gently closing a chapter, she turned her attention to the one she had been avoiding, the quiet distance in her marriage. And that evening she sat beside Mark and spoke plainly, not blaming him or accusing the past, but explaining how loneliness can grow even in stable lives when feelings go unshared. And Mark listened more carefully than she expected, admitting he too had felt the drift but didn't know how to name it, and that honesty opened a door neither realized had been closed, leading to long talks, slow reconnection, and a renewed effort to truly see each other again. And as weeks turned into months the house changed, not dramatically but meaningfully, filled with more conversation, more presence, more understanding. And Ethan grew into his own life with confidence, while Claire learned that compassion must always walk beside responsibility, and that moments of emotional intensity are not meant to be held forever but to teach, guide, and release. And when she finally looked back on the night she opened that half-closed door, she no longer felt uncertainty, only gratitude, because she understood that walking into someone's pain had not broken boundaries or created harm, it had revealed truth. And that truth reshaped her choices, strengthened her family, and reminded her that maturity is not the absence of feeling but the wisdom to respond with care, honesty, and respect. And in the quiet rhythm of everyday life, Claire realized her world had changed not through scandal or drama, but through courage, clarity, and the simple act of staying present when it mattered most.